Jamie Allen Bishop with Soul Heart Entertainment here on Tuesday for ToesDay. It is election day, November 3rd, 2020. So oddly enough, it just so happens that we're talking about our middle toes, which are all about how we take action. So hopefully everybody has taken action in voting today and or before today. And the action actually is related to our fire, to the fire element. So it's kind of how fiery we are. It's about our temperament, it's about action, it's about, actually it's about our heart chakra. That's where the heart chakra lies, is in our action. So if you haven't ever heard of something called heart math, I highly, highly recommend that you look up heart math, H-E-A-R-T-M-A-T-H. It's this idea that, or it's scientific research around the idea that taking a moment to center yourself and get into that heart space when you're in a crisis scenario. So for example, the ER doctors and nurses that are dealing with crisis scenarios quite often are being studied or have been studied. There's been lots and lots of research through the Heart Math Institute to track those who do and those who do not take that moment to tap into their heart space before they take action, and to see what happens in their experience, not just their experience actually, but their patient's experience. And it's pretty darn profound what has come out of those studies. So I highly recommend that you look those up. That's just one of those things that I recommend for anybody who is looking to be centered in their heart space when they're making decisions. So speaking of making decisions in your heart space, let's talk a little bit about toe reading. So in toe reading with our action toe, we're talking about how we view, or kind of the subconscious beliefs, if you will, of how action and or how our temperament shows up in our lives. So when we're talking about action or temperament, let's just take a quick look at where that shows up. This is the big toe, this is the second toe, this is the middle toe, okay? So where that shows up on the hologram of our body is right at the middle of the shoulder. So if somebody was having shoulder pain, I would maybe ask them where action has been kind of a pain, if you will, in their lives, and what that looks like. Like what is it that you're avoiding as far as taking action? And how is it making you feel? Because that temperament, or how we handle our temper, or our emotions really. Emotions is, emotion, that's all about how that action occurs, right? So when we're in that heart space, instead of our head space, around the emotions that happen in our lives, our action is more thoughtful, it's more cohesive, it happens more fluidly, it happens more I don't know, just easier. It's easier. It's easier to take action. It's easier to come up with the scenarios for how to take action and why to take action and stick to taking that action. So we'll look at a few different toe pictures to talk a little bit about how those toes might show up in our experience. For example, this gal has middle toes that have a tendency to kind of like point down to the earth a little bit. And if you look at her communication toes, which are her second toes or her air toes, they kind of bubble up at the tip. And then the action toes kind of take a little bit of a dive toward the earth. So what that means in toe reading is that she has lots of big ideas, but she's kind of not talking about them. She's keeping them to herself. And when it comes to actually taking action, she doesn't. She might start on that path, but then, that toe points to the floor, and that's generally speaking somebody who is really good at creating those ideas, but then in following through with taking that action, they just can't. They sort of, fall off a cliff, if you will, meaning that they're going to be far more excited about an idea, maybe like a think tank scenario. So maybe they're really, really, really great and brilliant at coming up with ideas, or coming up with solutions to problems, or coming up with these fabulous concepts. But then to actually take those concepts into a practice or into action would be really, really challenging for somebody with middle toes in particular that kind of have that, point down attitude toward them. I can't do that with my fingers. I know some people can. It's kind of cool to me. Whereas somebody like this, well, she kind of has something similar going on with her right toe, with her action toe kind of points down to the floor. But if you look at her left action toe, that one really comes straight forward and is kind of showing up just exactly how it, so her action internally is in alignment with where she like when she talks to herself around or angel guides or God or whatever that scenario looks like for this person in particular, she is taking action. She has a plan. There's motion that's going on in her life, or at least in her mind's eye, around where that shows up in her world. But to take that out into, the here and now, let's say the earthly reality, if you will, it would be really hard for her to follow through with that plan of action. Maybe it would even be hard for her to communicate what she's talking about or what she envisions. But that vision in her is really, really great. So maybe this is somebody who's really, really good at creating a vision or creating some sort of big picture plan of action. Like the plan of action might work really well, so maybe it's, getting it onto paper that she might be okay doing, but actually following through with what that looks like would be very hard for this person as well. Let me show you somebody who will follow through with what they're talking about. These toes are kind of my go-to for somebody who is exactly as they seem on this earth. So these toes kind of come straight forward. There's no widening out of the padding. There's no, coming to a point of the padding. The padding just kind of sits there. It's a little bit curved. It's not too curvy though. It has like a nice little flat spot. And it is hiding a little tiny bit on the left foot, only just the slightest bit. It's hiding underneath that communication toe. So internally, she probably has this situation where she might come up with a plan of action and it might look or it might sound really good in her head, but before she's going to be able to actually take action on that plan, she has to verbally communicate it, or she has to figure out what words she wants to use in order to get that action to come to fruition, right? So like somebody like this would be really good action taker, okay? This is somebody who's a go-getter, she's a doer, she's somebody who will make stuff happen in the world around her. So she would be kind of your go-to person for taking a plan. Let's say this person comes up with a great plan, or even either of these people might come up with a plan, but they wouldn't be the one to take it into action. The purple background and that blue background people, they would not be the ones to take that into action. But this person definitely would. Their toe, especially their right toe, which is their external self toe, their toe is coming straight out. It's close to the air toe, the communication toe. So those two would go hand in hand for this person. They would want to communicate what their ideas were, and they would want to make sure that I suspect anyway, that they're the type of person that will want to make sure that everybody's on board with the plan of action, and then they would be the best person to like delegate, okay, you take care of this, you take care of this, you take care of this, and let's just knock it out, all right? This is definitely the type of person that you want to bring to your house when you're moving. So this person, I don't know if it will translate on the video, but this person has a little bit of a point to their middle toe, and it's kind of hard to tell because with the tissue between the toes, it's hard to tell whether they're actually separate like that or not. But let's assume that they're slightly separate from each other, okay? That there's going to be a little bit of space between each of these toes naturally. Let's assume that. And that padding on that middle toe comes to a little bit of a point. So this is going to be somebody who's maybe going to be pointed about the way that they take action in their lives and or about the way that they communicate. They're going to be somebody who's going to be pointed when it comes to their emotions. They're not gonna sugarcoat it. It's not gonna be, they probably have a little bit of a tendency to be a little crass with their communication and how it comes across. So I'm of course thinking of Trump because he's just so crass. So he probably has a middle toe and a communication toe that are pointed, that have that like little bit of a point to the padding. I would love to see his toes. Maybe I will someday. If I do, I will share that with you. Same with Biden. Like Biden's going to be a little bit more rounded. There's going to be a little bit more softness to that toe. So it's that roundness to the tip of the toe is going to be a little bit softer. Whereas somebody who's pointed is going to kind of go through for the throat, they're going to be a little bit more die-hard, a little bit more, a little bit more in your face. Somebody that's softer, where they have that, rounder padding to the toe, they're going to be beating around the bush. They're maybe not going to go straight to the point. They're maybe going to be, here's maybe what it, that kind of thing. So they both have their blessings and they both have their curses, right? So let's look at one more set of toes here, middle toes in particular. Okay, so yeah, these are definitely good toes to look at. Okay, so on these toes, on these middle toes, they're evenly plump, I guess, throughout, each of the toes is evenly plump. The toenail polish is looking a little sketchy there, right? So I'm wondering if they're maybe trying to cover up something, right? Whereas color can represent a very specific idea or concept or chakra, if you will. When that color shows up as like it's covering up something that like an imperfection, or covering up something, as opposed to just painted on to look pretty. There's something going on there around that covering up scenario, if that makes sense. So that's something of interest to note. Yeah, I mean, I could say quite a bit around these toes. So on this one, actually on both of them, that padding on that action toe comes to a point, but it comes to a point on that big toe side of the toe, right? Of the action toe. So that big toe side is the past side. So there's a lot of action that's been taken, and because that pointed padding comes to that past side, that's probably the scenario where they'll take action more quickly or fluidly, is around past thoughts, beliefs, experiences. So they may feel more comfortable with the idea of taking action that they've already taken or that they've already experienced. Whereas if they were to have to take action for the future, for something that was unknown, something that wasn't comfortable to them, it would maybe take a little bit more effort, because it's going to feel like they're going uphill. And the reason I say that is because that padding is like uphill. It's like almost like an uphill battle. If I kind of, that's the phrase that's coming to mind when I'm talking about action toes that have like a pointed padding to them. So yeah, so that's quite a bit about little action toes. I think that we've talked about it before in the past, but I'll go over it really quickly here. These horizontal lines on this action toe, that would indicate that there's, let's say that they get a good start on their action plan, and then they come across an obstacle that might get in their way. And, because this first obstacle isn't too deep, the crevice in the foot, the horizontal bump, it's not too deep of a bump so they can get over it, and then they continue on, and then they come to a bigger obstacle. And so the belief system around that on these particular feet are that there's going to always be something that gets in the way of the progress being made. And so they probably bring that into their lives energetically. If you believe in the law of attraction, which of course I do, if your beliefs align with that scenario, where when you're taking action, and then you have an obstacle that stops you from taking action. If you can gain momentum again, and then again you have another big obstacle, and maybe gaining momentum after that second obstacle feels really, really uncomfortable, or incongruous, or what's the word I'm trying to think of? It just feels like it's maybe too hard even to follow through with. It can throw this person off track from reaching a big goal, because they expect those obstacles to be there. And so of course the obstacles show up. Does that make sense? So it's interesting how our beliefs really truly bring to us our experiences in life. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up when it comes to action, and specifically emotion, which I kind of talked about in the beginning, the middle toe is akin to the middle finger. And so, when we think of the middle finger, we think of, anger and frustration and, angst, if you will. And the middle toe is kind of where that shows up for us, involving our belief systems around the action that we take. And so that's why I mentioned in the beginning that heart math, when we can, before we're thrown into, or before we throw ourselves into a rage or a anger or a discomfort around anything, if we can take a moment and sink down to that heart level and really connect with our heart chakra around decisions that we're making and actions that we're taking, and around how that feels to us, the action will work way, way smoother. It will show up in a way that creates flow, that creates a desired result, and helps to avoid those obstacles in the path that can come up. So if you have horizontal indentations in your toes, those are typically pieces of the past and pieces of our expectations, where we expect there to be a deep valley or something difficult to overcome. One of the best ways to get over that, or fix it, if you will, it's not really fixing it, it's just kind of going into that space of forgiveness work over what it looks like to us, how it shows up, and whether those obstacles are going to be obstacles that show up as a blessing, or that show up as a challenge, or so it depends on our mindset and our emotion, how we handle the middle toe. And so when it comes to that middle toe and taking action, and our energy or our emotion around it, it definitely helps to do forgiveness work when it comes to the past challenges that we've come up against. Okay, so for example, if I were to have that on my action toe, and I was in the middle of a big, huge project, I would take some anointing oil or lotion or something that feels good to me. I would bend down and kind of massage that into my middle toe, and I would, if I have a very specific line that I want to work on releasing, or smoothing out a little bit, what I would do is I would hold my finger on it. My thumb is kind of the one that's the most sensitive. I used to do a lot of reflexology, so and that's kind of where my training comes from. And the reason actually why I found it, or why I was so attracted to toe reading, was because of that reflexology. So I'd use my thumb, I'd set my thumb on that divot, or that deep line, and I would hold it there and just kind of take a couple of centering deep breaths and ask, what is this about? Why does this crevice show up in my life? Where did this come from, basically? What happened to me that made this show up on my body? So oftentimes a memory will come flooding in, and that memory will feel like, for me anyway, it feels like a light bulb going off. It feels like, this is exactly what I knew that was gonna, I knew that was gonna be the thing that showed up. Only I didn't, until it actually showed up, until I asked, right? We have to ask for what we want, and then it shows up for us. So for me, when it comes to the healing piece of it, I want to know, where did this show up, and it sparks a memory. And so I go back to that memory, and it depends on who I was at the time. It depends how old I was at the time. It depends what I was going through at the time. All of those things, of course, are part of the reason I've held on to that belief system. Okay, so let's say I was 6 years old, I was roller skating, and I chipped my tooth because I fell. My roller skate stopped and my face didn't. My body didn't. I did a face plant on the concrete. So I chipped my tooth. And so maybe, taking action is scary for me because of that face plant that happened when I was 6. So I would go back to that, in my mind's eye, I would go back to that scenario where I was roller skating, I was picking up oranges, and my roller skate stopped and I face planted. And so how can I view that as my, almost 50-year-old self from a perspective of knowledge and from a perspective of now I'm not the 6-year-old who is terrified of, hurting myself again, or maybe, I don't know why I'm even suggesting this scenario, but it's kind of like that. You kind of go down the rabbit hole with the memories. And then when I have that memory and when I go through that scenario and I feel what I felt and I allow it to come and allow it to be released, and then maybe another memory comes up for me, maybe something else shows up in my mind's eye around taking action and going forward and then stopping, and then or having an obstacle come up or having something really scary happen, or maybe anyway. So you kind of go down the rabbit hole of those belief systems and where they came from and why they're showing up for you. And as you're holding your toe, you just do a little forgiveness work around it. Do a little bit of, okay, my little 6-year-old self, that is, hey, Natasha, thanks for joining. Oh, that's okay. No worries. You'll catch the replay. We're all about action and temperament today, which is our middle toe. So I'm talking about the lines that go across horizontally. So let me show you on this toe right here. Okay, so on these toes, you can see these very, very distinct, very deep, kind of intense lines on these toes. So one of the ways that we can release those is that forgiveness work. Okay, so what I was explaining is when we go to, I usually use some sort of lotion that I love, or some sort of something that feels good to me. And I will go down and I will use my reflexology skills and I'll touch that point and I'll just kind of, usually it will trigger some sort of memory. And when we trigger the memory, we kind of go back to that place, go back to that time. How old were we? What were we going through at the time? Maybe we can see it from a different perspective now that we're a little bit older, a little bit more wise, have a little bit more experience under our belt, and we can almost always release a lot of whatever angst it is. That line shows up as a deep crevice or a challenge or a roadblock or some sort of obstacle on the path to achieving whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. So when it shows up on our middle toe, and we're trying to take action and create an environment of fulfilling a dream or a destined path or some sort of project that we're working on, if we really, really want to get through that project without obstacles or with as few obstacles as is possible, sometimes it takes a little bit of that forgiveness work to release some of the beliefs, because these little crevices are beliefs that we hold around things being difficult or things being challenging or obstacles getting in the way, or that kind of thing. So it's just fascinating to me. So when we go down that rabbit hole of touching our toes, feeling the feelings that we felt, or going through, allowing that memory to come through, will, when we release it, oftentimes when it's a super deep crevice, another memory will pop up, and you just kind of follow those memories down that rabbit hole. Maybe do some EFT work if you haven't done EFT work around that specific scenario. So I was just telling a story about how when I was about 6, I was roller skating and picking up orange peels, and one of the orange peels stopped my skate, and I went, literally like a flat board where my face landed on the concrete. And so I had to do a little bit of forgiveness work around, because that was me taking action of picking up the orange peels, right? And so that little 6-year-old self said, well, taking action is scary, right? I'm gonna land on my face. I'm gonna crack my tooth or whatever. I mean, so ridiculous what our bodies hold on to and what our egos, gravitate toward in order to tell us that we're not safe doing something, right? So my 6-year-old self decided that it was not safe to take action. So I had to do a little forgiveness work to release that. So when I did that forgiveness work and releasing that action, or releasing that experience and how my little body held on to that scenario as action is scary, don't take action, you don't want to do that, you might fall on your face, literally. So then I, of course, had this other, memory pop up. And so I just went with it and, whatever. I can't remember what it is right now, but that was the one thing that it was like that starting point, that snowball that created this big, huge boulder that is this, deep crevice in my toe. And so when you go through the motions and you go through the little pieces of forgiveness work around those, releasing those ideas that there are always going to be obstacles, that you might as well not start because it's, you're going to end up falling on your face, whatever. It's amazing how the forgiveness work can really, really allow you to release those beliefs and not hold them anymore. It's just fascinating to me. So anyway, that's a little bit about forgiveness work today. So hopefully there's some good tidbits on getting in touch with some of the action things in your world. As you look down at your toe, you describe it to yourself, and that will tell you kind of where you're coming from as far as how action shows up in your life and how you kind of the deep-seated subconscious beliefs around that. Thank you for the hearts. And then doing a little bit of forgiveness work is what helps release the beliefs that no longer serve us. We're ready to let those beliefs go, and that's where you have to go a little bit deeper than we currently are. So just to let you know, I am taking action. I am doing something totally off the cuff and completely bizarre to me. I don't know. Actually, I do know why I'm taking this action. That was my dryer. My clothes are done. But I created a group called 30 Minute Dance Party with Jamie. So 3 days a week, I am going to do a 30-minute session, 5 minutes of warm-up, 20 minutes of dance party, and 5 minutes of cool down. And I just decided that, once upon a time, I created a class that where I just felt healthy. I felt healthier. I felt like I was moving. I felt like I was enjoying it. And it was Tybo with Billy Blanks, right? Remember those? So anyway, so I decided that I was going to just create this dance party because dancing is something I absolutely love to do. And I think it's so much fun. And so I'm inviting you to join me. So if you would like to join my 30 minutes dance party with Jamie group, come on over and let's dance together a few times a week. All right? Thank you so much for being here. And I'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, that is, for ToesDay. We're going to talk again about action toes, about temperament, about how how we handle, I think, some of the things around everything that's going on in our world right now. We'll talk a little bit about how to handle those and where it shows up and how to handle it, and we'll talk a little bit further about how to release it. So thank you, Jamie Allen Bishop with Soul Heart Entertainment here. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.